The Galactic Council chambers had never felt so cold. Ambassador Zethkar of the Vorthan Empire adjusted his ceremonial robes as he watched the newcomers enter. Humans. Such a young species, barely 3 centuries into space travel, yet here they stood requesting membership in the most ancient governing body in the galaxy. "State your case," High Chancellor Veltifes commanded from her crystalline throne, her 4 arms folded in apparent boredom. The ethereal race had ruled the galaxy for over 50,000 years, and their patience for upstart species was notoriously thin. The human ambassador, a woman named Sarah Chen, stepped forward without the trembling fear that usually accompanied first-time supplicants. "Honored Chancellor, humanity seeks only to contribute to galactic peace and prosperity. We offer our unique perspectives and capabilities to serve the greater good." A ripple of barely contained laughter echoed through the chamber. The Krell delegates' mandibles clicked in amusement. "Unique capabilities? You've mastered basic fusion drives and kinetic weapons. Children's toys compared to our quantum manipulators and reality shapers." Chen's expression remained steady. "We bring something different, something you may not have considered valuable until now." "And what might that be?" Veltifes asked, her tone dripping with condescension. "Stubbornness." The word hung in the air like a challenge. Several delegates exchanged glances, unsure whether to be insulted or amused by such simplicity. "We have survived ice ages, plagues, wars, and our own worst impulses," Chen continued. "We've clawed our way from caves to the stars not because we're the strongest or the smartest, but because we refuse to quit. Ever." Zethkar leaned forward, intrigued despite himself. His species had dominated through superior technology and strategy, but there was something in the human's voice that suggested depths yet unexplored. The vote was swift and predictable. Humanity was granted provisional membership, the galactic equivalent of a participation trophy. They would be allowed to observe, to learn, but their voice would carry little weight in matters of true importance. As the session ended, Zethkar approached Chun in the corridor outside. "An interesting presentation, Ambassador. Though I fear you may have oversold your species' significance." Chun smiled, and for a moment Zethkar saw something that made his blood run cold. It wasn't anger or disappointment at the dismissive treatment. It was patience, the kind of patience a predator shows while waiting for the perfect moment to strike. "We'll see," she said simply. 3 months later, the first reports arrived. The Devourers had returned. For 20,000 years, they had been nothing more than a cautionary tale told to young civilizations. Ancient beings from the void between galaxies, creatures of pure hunger that consumed entire star systems before moving on to the next feeding ground. The last time they had appeared, it had taken the combined might of a dozen major civilizations and the sacrifice of 3 entire species to drive them back into the darkness. Now they had returned, and they were hungry. The first system to fall was Kepler 442, a Vorthan colony world with 2 billion inhabitants. The Devourers arrived without warning, their massive bioships blotting out the sun as they began their feast. By the time the distress signal reached the nearest military outpost, there was nothing left but empty space and the lingering taste of terror in the quantum foam. The Galactic Council convened in emergency session. Ancient defense protocols were activated, fleets were mobilized, and the greatest military minds in the galaxy gathered to plan their response. The humans, as provisional members, were allowed to observe but not participate in the strategic discussions. Admiral Kethvar of the Consortium Navy outlined the traditional approach. "We establish a defensive perimeter around core systems, use our most advanced weapons to thin their numbers, then execute a fighting retreat to predetermined fallback positions. We did this before, and we can do it again." The assembled delegates nodded in agreement. It was the sensible approach, the one that had worked in the past. Minimize losses, preserve the greater population, accept the sacrifice of outer rim worlds as the cost of survival. "What about offensive operations?" Chun asked from the observer section. The chamber fell silent. HFY turned her ancient gaze toward the human. "Offensive operations against the Devourers are suicide. They are too numerous, too powerful. Defense is our only option." Has anyone ever tried a sustained offensive campaign against them? Admiral Kethvar's voice carried the weight of millennia of military tradition. Young species often think in terms of attack rather than survival. The Devourers cannot be defeated through conventional warfare. They are a force of nature like a stellar collapse or quantum storm. You endure them until they pass. Chun stood, her voice cutting through the chamber's acoustics like a blade. Then you've never fought humans. The Vorthan Admiral's translation implants struggled with the concept Chun expressed next. The closest equivalent in galactic standard was something like aggressive persistence in the face of overwhelming odds. But even that failed to capture the full meaning of what humans called spite. The first human fleet arrived at the Kepler system 3 days later. Commander Jack Morrison had seen combat before, but nothing like this. The Devourer bioships stretched across the void like a living cancer, each one the size of a small moon. Their surfaces pulsed with organic rhythms, and tendrils of dark energy reached out to drain the last traces of life from the dead planets below. "Sir, we're reading over 200 hostile contacts," reported Lieutenant Kim from the sensor station. "Their energy signatures are off the charts. Each one of those things could glass a planet." Morrison nodded grimly. The human fleet consisted of 47 ships, representing nearly a quarter of Earth's total military assets. By any rational calculation, they were about to die in the most spectacular fashion possible. "Open a channel to the fleet," Morrison commanded. "All ships, this is Defiant. You know why we're here. The galaxy thinks these things can't be beaten. They're wrong. Today we prove that humans don't retreat. We don't surrender. And we sure as hell don't let monsters eat our neighbors without a fight." The response came from every ship simultaneously. Thousands of voices united in 3 simple words. "Aura, sir." "Confirmed." The first wave of Devourers moved to intercept them with the lazy confidence of apex predators encountering gnats. Their bioweapons reached out across space, reality-bending attacks that had shattered the most advanced shields ever created. The human ships didn't even try to block them. Instead, they did something the Devourers had never encountered in 20,000 years of feeding. They charged directly into the attacks, their hulls designed not to deflect damage but to absorb it and keep functioning. Nuclear fire washed over them. Exotic energies tore through their armor, and half the fleet took critical damage in the first exchange. And they kept coming. "What are they doing?" Admiral Kethvar whispered from his command ship, watching the tactical display in horror. The human vessels were fighting like madmen, taking punishment that would have crippled any sane military force. "They're buying time," Zethkar realized. "Look at their formation. They're not trying to win this engagement. They're studying the enemy." The human ships fought with a brutal efficiency that defied their technological limitations. When their energy weapons failed, they used kinetic projectiles. When their missiles were exhausted, they rammed. When their hulls were breached, they detonated their reactors to take as many Devourers with them as possible. By the time the engagement ended, 39 human ships were destroyed or disabled. The 8 survivors limped away into hyperspace, their mission seemingly a complete failure. But they had learned something. 3 days later, the second human fleet arrived at the Rigel system, where the Devourers had begun consuming another colony world. This time, they brought friends. "Unknown vessels, this is the Galactic Defense Force," Admiral Kethvar transmitted. "You are ordered to maintain minimum safe distance and observe only. We will handle the tactical situation." The human response was immediate and polite. "Negative, Admiral. We're here to kill monsters. Feel free to help or get out of the way." The combined fleet that engaged the Devourers at Rigel was the largest military force assembled in over 10,000 years. Vorthan reality shapers, Krell quantum manipulators, ethereal time dilators, and dozens of other exotic weapon systems opened fire in perfect coordination. The Devourers shrugged off the assault like rain. Then the humans opened fire. Their weapons were crude by galactic standards, simple kinetic projectiles and nuclear warheads launched from mass drivers. But they had learned from their first encounter. Every shot was precisely targeted at the weak points they had died to discover. More importantly, they had taught their allies where to aim. Target the neural clusters behind the feeding tentacles. Commander Sarah Chun transmitted to the entire fleet. Concentrated fire, sustained barrage. Don't let up for even a second. For the first time in galactic history, devourers began to die in significant numbers. Not the occasional lucky shot that had claimed one or two in past engagements, but systematic extermination. The creatures' confidence evaporated as their seemingly invincible forms were torn apart by coordinated fire. But the humans weren't finished. As the last devourer in the system fell, Chen's voice carried across all frequencies. All ships, prepare for hyperspace pursuit. We're following them home. The galaxy held its breath. In every previous encounter, the devourers had retreated when faced with serious resistance, disappearing into the void between galaxies to lick their wounds and return when the galaxy had forgotten how to fight them. No one had ever followed them before. Ambassador Chun, Admiral Kethvar's voice carried a note of desperate concern. The void between galaxies is uncharted territory. We have no idea what we'll find there, no supply lines, no backup. It's suicide. Chen's response was heard by every ship in the fleet, recorded by every sensor array, and transmitted across the galactic communication network within hours. Admiral, with respect, you still don't understand what you're dealing with. We're not here to play defense. We're not here to manage acceptable losses. We're here to exterminate every last one of these things, even if it takes us to the edge of the universe and back. She paused, and when she spoke again, her voice carried the weight of an entire species' determination. The devourers made one critical error. They picked a fight with humans, and humans always finish what we start. The combined fleet entered hyperspace, following the devourers' retreat vector into the endless darkness between galaxies. Behind them, the Galactic Council chambers erupted in chaos as delegates tried to comprehend what they had just witnessed. For the first time in galactic history, someone was taking the fight to the monsters. And they were winning. The void between galaxies was a place of absolute darkness, where the space between stars stretched for millions of light years without so much as a single photon to break the endless night. It was here, in the most desolate region of the universe, that the devourers had built their feeding grounds. Commander Chun stood on the bridge of the UES Vengeance, watching the tactical display with growing horror and determination. The structures they had discovered defied every law of physics and decency. Massive bioconstructs the size of solar systems, fed by the life force of countless consumed worlds. Breeding pools where new devourers gestated in the concentrated essence of extinct civilizations. How many? She asked quietly. Conservative estimate? 10 million adult devourers, with another 50 million in various stages of development, reported Chief Science Officer Park. The energy readings suggest they've been feeding here for over 100,000 years. The assembled fleet had grown during their journey. Word of the human offensive had spread throughout the galaxy, and ships from dozens of species had joined the expedition. Not because their governments ordered them to, but because their crews had volunteered. The galaxy's greatest warriors, scientists, and tacticians had come to witness what many believed would be either the greatest military victory in galactic history or the most spectacular suicide ever attempted. Sir, Lieutenant Kim called from the communications station. We're receiving transmissions from the devourer structures. They want to negotiate. Chen's expression didn't change. Put them through. The voice that filled the bridge was ancient beyond measure, layered with harmonics that spoke of consciousness older than most stars. Small beings from the spiral arm, you have shown remarkable persistence. We offer terms. Withdraw now, and we will spare your galaxy for another 1,000 years. Counteroffer, Chun replied without hesitation. Surrender now, and we'll make your deaths quick. The silence that followed was broken by something the galaxy had never heard before. A devourer's confusion. You do not understand. We are inevitable. We are the end of all things. Civilizations rise and fall, but we endure. We have consumed 1,000 galaxies. Yeah, well, you never consumed one with humans in it. Chun cut the transmission and turned to her tactical officer. All ships, battle formation. Target the nursery structures first. We're not just here to kill the adults. We're here to make sure nothing like this ever happens again. The battle that followed would be remembered as the most savage conflict in galactic history. The Devourers, faced with the first serious threat to their existence in eons, fought with the desperation of beings who suddenly understood mortality. Their bioweapons carved through space itself, their reality-bending attacks turning entire sections of the void into death traps where physics broke down and time flowed backward. The combined galactic fleet responded with everything they had learned in 50,000 years of warfare. Quantum torpedoes that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously, gravity weapons that collapsed space-time itself, energy barriers that could contain the birth of stars. And through it all, the humans pressed forward. Vengeance, this is Admiral Kethvar. The Vorthan commander's voice crackled through the interference of a dozen ongoing reality storms. We've lost 30% of our fleet. The ethereal timeships are trapped in temporal loops. We need to fall back and regroup. Negative, Chen replied, watching as another human cruiser detonated its reactor core to take out a cluster of Devourer spawn. We don't have the luxury of a second chance. If we retreat now, they'll adapt to our tactics and spread across the galaxy before we can mount another offensive. But we're being slaughtered. Chen's voice carried across every communication channel in the fleet. Yes, we are. And we're going to keep being slaughtered until every last one of these things is dead. Because that's what humans do. We die hard, and we take our enemies with us. The turning point came when the humans did something no sane military force had ever attempted. They began boarding the Devourer bioships. The assault shuttles were crude compared to the exotic technologies surrounding them, simple metal boxes driven by chemical rockets. But they carried something the Devourers had never encountered. Human Marines with fusion charges and absolutely nothing left to lose. This is Sergeant Martinez, Bravo Company. The transmission was barely audible through the static of bioelectrical interference. We're inside their neural core. These things are definitely organic, but they've got something like a central nervous system. If we can plant charges in the right spots. The explosion that followed vaporized 3 cubic kilometers of Devourer biomatter and sent shock waves through their entire hive network. For the first time in their existence, the ancient creatures experienced something they had never known. Fear. More boarding parties launched. Human engineers and Marines, supported by Vorthan reality shapers and Krell quantum specialists, fought their way through the living nightmares of Devourer bioships. They died by the thousands, but each death bought knowledge. Each sacrifice revealed another weakness. They're not invincible, Chun broadcast to the entire fleet as another Devourer Titan collapsed into its component molecules. They're just very, very old parasites. And every parasite has a weakness. The battle raged for 72 hours. By the end, only a third of the original fleet remained operational. Entire species had sacrificed their last starships to the cause. The void between galaxies was littered with debris from both sides, a graveyard of epic proportions. But when the smoke cleared, the Devourers were gone. Not retreated, not hiding, gone. Every last bioconstruct had been destroyed, every nursery pool sterilized, every trace of their 100,000-year reign of terror erased from existence. The void between galaxies was silent once again, but this time it was the silence of genuine emptiness rather than lurking menace. Chun stood on what remained of her bridge, watching the tactical display show nothing but empty space where the greatest threat in galactic history had once nested. Her ship was held together by emergency patches and sheer determination, her crew reduced to a skeleton force of walking wounded. All ships, this is vengeance, she transmitted. Mission accomplished. Let's go home. The journey back to the galaxy took 3 weeks. Word of their victory had already spread through the communication networks, but the reality of what they had accomplished didn't truly sink in until they reached the first inhabited system. Every ship in the sector was waiting for them. Not just military vessels, but civilian transports, merchant freighters, passenger liners, and private yachts. Millions of beings from hundreds of species had come to witness the return of the fleet that had done the impossible. As the survivors limped into orbit around the capital world, Chun received a priority transmission from the Galactic Council. Ambassador Chun, High Chancellor Veltefus's voice carried a tone no human had ever heard from her before. The Council requests your immediate presence. We have matters to discuss. The Galactic Council chambers had been transformed. Where once stood the ancient seats of power arranged in careful hierarchy, now there was a single circular table. Every delegate, from the youngest civilizations to the most ancient empires, sat as equals. At the head of the table, a new chair had been installed, marked with the simple emblem of a blue world orbiting a yellow star. Sarah Chun entered the chamber to absolute silence. Her uniform was still scorched from the void battle, her face bearing scars that would never fully heal. Behind her walked the surviving commanders of the greatest military victory in galactic history, each one carrying the weight of their species' ultimate sacrifice. High Chancellor HFY rose from her crystalline throne and, for the first time in 50,000 years of recorded history, bowed. "Humanity," she said, her voice carrying across the chamber with reverential awe. "The galaxy owes you a debt that can never be repaid." Chun remained standing, her expression unreadable. "We didn't do it for debts or glory. We did it because it needed doing." "Yes," Veltivisus replied, "and that is why you succeeded where we could not." The Krell delegate activated his translation matrix, clicking rapidly before speaking. "In our archives, we have records of 17 previous Devourer incursions. Each time, our response was calculated, measured, designed to minimize losses while preserving the greater galactic civilization. Each time, we allowed them to feed until they grew bored and departed." Admiral Kethvar stood, his reptilian features showing an emotion humans had never seen from his species. "Shame. We told ourselves we were being wise, strategic. We convinced ourselves that acceptable losses were a necessary evil. But the truth is we were cowards." "You weren't cowards," Chun replied quietly. "You were smart. Your approach worked for 50,000 years. But sometimes being smart isn't enough." "What would have happened if humanity had accepted our traditional strategy?" asked the ethereal representative, her forearms folded in contemplation. Chen's answer sent a chill through the assembled delegates. The Devourers would have fed, grown stronger, and eventually consumed every living thing in the galaxy. They weren't just hunting for food anymore. According to our intelligence analysis, they were preparing for a final harvest. One last feeding frenzy before moving on to the next galaxy. The implications hung in the air like a death sentence. Every delegate in the chamber understood that their ancient strategy of managed retreat had been leading to total extinction. "How many?" Veltivis asked, though her tone suggested she already knew the answer would horrify her. "Based on the bioconstructs we found, they had the capacity to strip every inhabited system in the galaxy within a standard year," replied Commander Park, Chen's chief science officer. "They weren't planning to leave anyone behind this time." The silence that followed was broken by an unexpected sound. The clicking of Krell mandibles in what humans had learned was their equivalent of bitter laughter. "We spent millennia building our great civilizations, our perfect technologies, our elegant solutions to every problem," the Krell delegate said. "And in the end, it took a species that fights with nuclear explosives and kinetic projectiles to save us all because we had forgotten the most basic truth of existence." "Which is?" Chen asked. "Sometimes you have to be willing to die fighting rather than live hiding." The formal ceremonies took hours. Humanity was granted full membership in the Galactic Council, along with a permanent seat at the leadership table. Trade agreements were signed, technology exchanges approved, and formal apologies offered for the initial dismissive treatment. But the real change went deeper than politics or diplomacy. Captain Torres of the UES Defiant was approached by a group of young Vorthan naval officers after the ceremony. Their leader, a junior lieutenant with ritual scars marking her as a combat veteran, spoke in careful but respectful standard. "Captain, my squad would be honored to serve under human command. We want to learn how to fight like you do." Similar scenes played out across the capital world. Engineers wanted to study human persistence in design philosophy. Diplomats sought to understand how a species could maintain unity while embracing such diversity. Military commanders requested joint training exercises to learn what they termed aggressive tenacity. But it was the children who showed the truest measure of how much the galaxy had changed. In the observation deck of the orbital station, Chun watched as a group of young beings from a dozen different species played together. They were acting out the battle of the void, taking turns being human marines storming devourer bioships. The game had spread across the galaxy in the weeks following the victory, and in every version the humans were the heroes. "It's remarkable," observed Dr. Elon, the human cultural attaché. "6 months ago, most of these species had never heard of us. Now their children are pretending to be us." Chun nodded, but her expression remained troubled. "That's what worries me." "What do you mean?" "They're learning the wrong lesson." Chun turned away from the viewport, her scarred face reflecting the distant starlight. "They think we won because we're somehow superior warriors, or because we have some special gift for violence. They don't understand that we won because we were desperate." Dr. Elon frowned. "Desperate?" Every human who died in that battle knew exactly what they were fighting for. Not for glory or conquest or some abstract political goal. They were fighting for their children's right to exist. For their species' right to a future. When you're fighting for survival, you don't count the cost. Through the viewport, they could see construction crews working on the memorial being built to honor the fallen. It would be the largest monument in galactic history, with the names of every being who had died in the Battle of the Void inscribed in quantum crystal that would last until the heat death of the universe. But Chun knew that the real monument wasn't being built in space. It was being built in the minds of an entire galaxy that had learned a new definition of courage. Admiral Kethvar's voice came over the station's communication system. "Ambassador Chun, please report to the command center. We have a situation developing in the outer rim." Chen's blood ran cold. "More devourers?" "No, ma'am. Something else. Something new. And they're asking for you specifically." As Chun made her way through the station corridors, she passed more groups of mixed-species personnel working together with a camaraderie that would have been unthinkable just months before. The victory over the Devourers had done more than save the galaxy from extinction. It had shown every species that cooperation could achieve the impossible. But the universe, Chun reflected grimly, was very good at finding new ways to test that cooperation. The briefing room was packed with the galaxy's top military and scientific minds, but all eyes were focused on the holographic display showing the outer rim territories. What they saw defied every understanding of physics, biology, and sanity. "The anomaly appeared 6 days ago," reported Dr. Veltan, the consortium's chief xenobiologist. "It's a spatial distortion roughly the size of a small moon, but readings indicate it's not from our universe." Chun studied the swirling vortex of impossible geometries on the display. "Dimensional breach? More than that. Our quantum analysts believe it's a deliberate gateway. Something is using it to enter our reality from elsewhere." Admiral Kethvar activated another section of the hologram. 3 hours ago, they made contact. The transmission came directly from the anomaly, broadcast on frequencies that shouldn't exist according to our understanding of physics. "What did they say?" The Admiral's reptilian features showed genuine unease. "They want to meet with the species that destroyed the Devourers. Specifically, they want to meet with humans." Chun felt ice forming in her veins. "Play the message." The voice that filled the briefing room was unlike anything the galaxy had ever heard. It didn't use sound waves or electromagnetic radiation, but somehow spoke directly to the consciousness of everyone present. It was ancient beyond the Devourers, vast beyond the ethereals, and utterly alien in a way that made reality itself seem fragile. "Greetings, inhabitants of this dimensional substrate. We are the architects. We have observed your recent accomplishment. The elimination of our cattle was unexpected. Impressive. We would speak with those responsible." The transmission ended, leaving the assembled beings in stunned silence. Dr. Veltan was the first to find her voice. "Cattle? They called the Devourers cattle? That's not the worst part," Chin said quietly. "If they're telling the truth, that means the Devourers weren't just some cosmic force of nature. They were somebody's livestock." The implications crashed over the room like a tidal wave. The creatures that had terrorized the galaxy for millennia, that had required the ultimate sacrifice of dozens of species to defeat, were nothing more than farm animals to these beings. Ambassador, Admiral Kethvar's voice was carefully controlled. I must strongly advise against any direct contact. If these architects are as powerful as they claim, and if they view the devourers as mere cattle, then we may have just announced our existence to something far worse than anything we've faced. Chun was quiet for a long moment, staring at the swirling anomaly on the display. When she finally spoke, her words carried the weight of a decision that would shape the galaxy's future. Prep a diplomatic vessel. Small crew, volunteer only. If these things wanted to destroy us, they could have done it already. The fact that they're talking means they want something. And if it's a trap? Chen's smile was cold as the void between stars. Then we spring it. On our terms. The ship that approached the dimensional anomaly 3 days later was a marvel of cooperative engineering. Human hull design reinforced with Vorthan reality anchors, Krell quantum shields powered by ethereal temporal cores. The crew was equally diverse. Humans, Vorthans, Krell, and representatives from a dozen other species. All volunteers who understood they might not return. Chun stood on the bridge as they approached the swirling gateway, watching sensors struggle to make sense of readings that violated every known law of physics. The anomaly was beautiful in its impossibility, colors that had no names shifting through dimensions that didn't exist. Contact, reported the sensor operator. Something's coming through. The ship that emerged from the anomaly made every vessel in the galaxy look like a primitive raft. It was constructed from crystallized spacetime itself, its hull shifting between dimensions as it moved. Energy patterns flowed across its surface like living thought, and looking directly at it caused a peculiar sensation of existing in multiple realities simultaneously. Incoming transmission, the communications officer announced unnecessarily. Everyone on the bridge could feel the presence pressing against their minds. Welcome, little ones. Permission to come aboard your vessel. We would see these humans who dare hunt the unkillable. Chun straightened her uniform and checked her sidearm, knowing it would be useless but taking comfort in the familiar weight. Permission granted. But understand that we're not defenseless, and we don't intimidate easily. The laughter that followed made the ship's hull ring like a bell. Oh, we know exactly what you are, Sarah Chen of Earth. We have been watching your species since you first touched the void. You are chaos given form, entropy with consciousness. And that makes you very, very dangerous. The being that materialized on the bridge defied description. It existed in 7 dimensions simultaneously, its form shifting between states of matter that hadn't been invented yet. When it spoke, reality bent around its words. I am Synthesis, speaker for the architects. We who shaped the first galaxies and seeded the early universe with the possibility of life. For eons beyond counting, we have maintained the balance, ensuring that no single species grows too powerful, too numerous, too disruptive. The devourers were your method of population control, Chun realized. One of many. We have shepherded 1,000 galaxies through their growth cycles, pruning when necessary, guiding when possible. Your galaxy was particularly promising. Such diversity, such potential. We allowed it to flourish for 50 millennia, watching your various species develop their unique gifts. The architect paused, and Chun could feel its attention focusing on her with crushing intensity. Then you appeared. Humans. A species that should not exist according to any reasonable model of evolution. Too aggressive to survive, too stubborn to adapt, too chaotic to achieve interstellar civilization. Yet here you are, having accomplished the impossible. You sound disappointed, Chin observed, concerned. The devourers served a purpose beyond mere population control. They were a test, a filter to ensure that only species capable of transcending their limitations could inherit the galaxy's ultimate destiny. The bridge fell silent except for the hum of life support systems. Chun felt the weight of every eye upon her, human and alien alike. And what destiny is that? Synthesis gestured, and suddenly the bridge's viewports showed not the familiar stars of their galaxy, but the endless void beyond. In that darkness, lights were moving. Thousands of them. Millions. each one a galaxy like their own, and each one under siege by forces that made the Devourers look like harmless parasites. The universe is vast, Sarah Chun, and it is not empty. The true predators dwell in the spaces between realities, feeding on the collapse of cosmic structures. They have consumed countless galaxy clusters, and they are coming here. The test of the Devourers was meant to prepare your galaxy for what comes next. Chun stared at the approaching lights, each one representing the death of countless civilizations. How long do we have? By your measurements? Perhaps 1,000 standard years. But that assumes optimal preparation and perfect unity among your species. Given the fractious nature of galactic politics, we estimated half that time before your civilizations tore themselves apart under the pressure. Estimated past tense, Chun noted. What changed? Synthesis turned its impossible attention fully upon her, and for a moment Chun felt as if she was standing before the judgment of the universe itself. You changed everything, Sarah Chun of Earth. Your species has done something we thought impossible. You have united the galaxy not through conquest or manipulation, but through sacrifice. You have created something we have never seen in all our eons of observation. Which is hope. The revelation of the true threat changed everything. Within hours of Synthesis's departure, the Galactic Council was in permanent emergency session. The comfortable politics of the past were swept away, replaced by the stark reality of species-wide extinction. But something remarkable was happening. Instead of the panic and finger-pointing that might have been expected, the galaxy was pulling together with unprecedented unity. The victory over the Devourers had proven that cooperation could achieve the impossible, and now every species was committed to proving it again. Chun stood in the newly constructed Strategic Command Center, watching displays that showed construction projects on a scale that dwarfed anything in galactic history. Entire star systems were being converted into fortress worlds. Ancient enemies were sharing their most classified technologies. Species that had barely achieved spaceflight were working alongside civilizations older than Earth's sun. The Vorthans have agreed to share their reality manipulation technology, reported Admiral Kethvar. The Ethereals are opening their temporal research archives. Even the isolationist species from the galactic core are sending ships and personnel. What about the architects? Chen asked. Are they helping? In their way. They've provided technical specifications for weapons that exist in 17 dimensions simultaneously, and defense networks that can fold spacetime itself. But they've made it clear that the actual fighting will be up to us. Chen nodded. It made sense in a cosmic sort of way. The architects were gardeners, not warriors. They shaped and guided, but when predators came calling, it was up to the garden to defend itself. Ma'am, called Lieutenant Kim from the communications station. Incoming priority transmission from Earth. It's marked, personal, and urgent. Chen's blood ran cold. Personal messages from Earth during a galactic crisis could only mean one thing. She accepted the transmission in her private office, steeling herself for the news she dreaded. The hologram that appeared was her brother Michael, older now and wearing the blue uniform of Earth's Planetary Defense Force. His face was grim but determined. Sarah, I know you're busy saving the galaxy again, but I thought you should know. The volunteer fleets are ready. Every nation, every colony, every orbital habitat. When the call comes, Earth will send everything we have. Chun felt her throat tighten. Michael, this isn't like the Devourers. The casualties are going to be astronomical. Yeah, we figured. But here's the thing, sis. You taught the galaxy something when you went after those monsters. You taught them that sometimes you have to be willing to lose everything to save everything. Well, guess what? We learned that lesson too. The transmission showed scenes from Earth. Massive shipyards working around the clock, volunteers lining up at recruitment centers, children in schools learning emergency protocols. But what struck Chen most was the absence of fear. There was determination, resolve, even grim excitement, but no terror. The whole planet knows what's coming, Michael continued. And we're not running, not hiding, not looking for someone else to solve our problems. We're humans, Sarah. We finish what we start. The transmission ended. leaving Chun alone with the weight of her species' trust. Through her office viewport, she could see ships from across the galaxy arriving daily, their crews eager to learn human tactics, human determination, human stubbornness in the face of impossible odds. 3 months later, the first scouts of the extra-universal predators arrived. They came through tears in reality itself, beings of pure hunger that made the devourers look like tame pets. Where the devourers had been biological, these things were conceptual. They didn't just consume matter and energy. They consumed the idea of existence itself. Systems they passed through didn't just die. They were retroactively erased from history. The first engagement took place in the Terminus system, where the combined galactic fleet had established their primary defense line. The battle lasted 17 minutes. When it was over, the Terminus system had never existed. The 30,000 ships defending it had never been built. The 2 billion personnel manning them had never been born. Only the protected observation posts, shielded by architect technology, retained any memory of what had been lost. "We need a new strategy," Admiral Kethvar announced to the Emergency Council session. His voice carried the strain of a being who had watched an entire star system be unwritten from existence. "Conventional warfare is useless against enemies that can erase the concept of our weapons." "What about the architect weapons?" asked the ethereal representative. "Effective but limited. We have perhaps a dozen reality anchors capable of preventing erasure, and they can only protect small areas. Against a full invasion fleet, they'll be overwhelmed in hours." Chun had been quiet throughout the briefing, studying the tactical displays with the intensity that had made her legendary. When she finally spoke, her words carried the conviction that had united a galaxy. "We're thinking about this wrong. We're trying to fight them like they're just more powerful versions of enemies we've faced before. But they're not. They're something entirely different." "What do you mean?" Admiral Kethvar asked. "They don't exist in our reality. They exist in the concept of reality. When they attack a system, they're not destroying it. They're convincing the universe that it never existed in the first place." Dr. Veltan leaned forward, her scientific mind racing to follow Chen's logic. "You're suggesting they're using some form of conceptual warfare." "Exactly. Which means we need to fight them on the conceptual level." Chun activated the holographic display, showing the galaxy-wide defense network they had constructed. "Every ship, every weapon, every soldier we have is part of a larger idea. The idea that this galaxy will survive, that its people will endure, that life will triumph over extinction." "But they just proved that idea wrong," protested the Krell delegate. "They erased an entire system." Chen's smile was fierce. "No, they proved that individual systems can be erased. But the idea of the galaxy's survival, that's bigger than any one system. It exists in every ship, every mind, every heart that refuses to give up." The concept was radical, audacious, and completely insane by conventional military thinking. Instead of trying to stop the predators from erasing individual targets, they would make those targets irrelevant. Every ship would carry the essence of the fleet. Every soldier would embody the spirit of their entire species. Every system would be a microcosm of the galaxy's will to survive. The architects were skeptical. "You propose to weaponize the concept of hope itself," Synthesis observed during their next meeting. "Such things are possible, but the cost will be everything," Chen finished. "Every person who participates becomes a living anchor for the galaxy's continued existence. If they die, they're gone forever. No backup copies, no resurrection technology, no second chances. But their sacrifice becomes part of the conceptual framework that keeps the galaxy real. And if you fail?" Chun looked out at the stars, each one representing countless lives depending on her decision. "Then we fail as ourselves, not as some pale shadow hiding behind reality barriers." The preparation took 6 months. Every species contributed something unique to the conceptual defense network. The ethereals provided temporal anchoring, ensuring that the galaxy's history couldn't be retroactively altered. The Vorthans offered reality-shaping techniques that could reinforce the fundamental laws of physics. The Krell contributed quantum entanglement matrices that would make the galaxy's existence simultaneously dependent on and independent of any single component. But it was the humans who provided the core element, the absolute refusal to accept defeat. When the main Predator fleet arrived, they found something unprecedented. Instead of discrete targets to erase, they encountered a galaxy that existed as a single, unified concept. Every ship that attacked one system found itself fighting the entire galaxy. Every attempt to unmake a world triggered defensive responses from billions of interconnected minds. The war that followed was unlike anything in the history of existence. Battles were fought on multiple levels of reality simultaneously. Fleets engaged in normal space while their concepts clashed in dimensional frameworks that existed only in mathematics. Soldiers died knowing that their deaths would either strengthen the galaxy's resolve or weaken its ability to remain real. Chun commanded from the bridge of the UES Destiny, a ship that existed in 17 dimensions and carried the hopes of every human who had ever lived. Around her, the crew worked with the calm efficiency of people who had accepted that failure meant not just death, but complete non-existence. "Ma'am, the Predators are concentrating their attack on the core worlds," reported Lieutenant Kim. "They're trying to unmake the Galactic Council chambers." "Let them," Chin replied. "The council chambers are just a building. The idea of galactic unity exists everywhere our ships can fly." The battle raged for 3 years. Systems were erased and restored as the conceptual war swung back and forth across multiple dimensions. Heroes emerged from every species, individuals who became living symbols of their people's determination to exist. Commander Martinez, now an old man but still leading Marines into impossible battles, became the embodiment of human stubbornness. When the Predators erased the concept of kinetic weapons, he continued fighting with nothing but harsh language and unbreakable will. Dr. Veltan transformed herself into a living database of galactic knowledge, ensuring that no matter what the Predators unmade, someone would remember what had been lost and could will it back into existence. Admiral Kethvar became the tactical genius of the ages, coordinating battles across 17 dimensions while simultaneously existing as the strategic concept that held the fleet together. But it was Chun who became the ultimate symbol of the galaxy's refusal to surrender. She existed simultaneously as a flesh-and-blood human and as the living embodiment of hope itself. When Predators attempted to erase her, they found they couldn't target her without unmaking the entire concept of resistance. The turning point came when the Predators made their final push, attempting to erase the concept of the galaxy itself. They struck at the fundamental idea of stellar formation, trying to convince the universe that stars had never been able to form in this region of space. The conceptual backlash was catastrophic. Reality itself began to unravel as the most basic assumptions about physics were called into question. For a moment that lasted eternity, the galaxy existed in a state of pure uncertainty, balanced between existence and void. Then every conscious being in the galaxy made the same choice simultaneously. They chose to exist. They chose to remember. They chose to fight. The surge of unified will that followed was like nothing the universe had ever experienced. The Predators, beings of pure entropy and negation, found themselves facing something they had never encountered: an entire galaxy's worth of conscious entities who absolutely refused to be erased. The conceptual explosion that followed rewrote the local laws of reality. The Predators weren't just defeated, they were retroactively prevented from ever having existed in this dimensional framework. The galaxy didn't just survive, it became existentially stronger, its right to exist carved into the fundamental structure of space-time itself. When the war ended, Chun stood on the observation deck of the rebuilt Galactic Council chambers, watching ships from across the galaxy returning home. The victory had come at a terrible cost. Entire species had sacrificed themselves to maintain the conceptual framework that kept their neighbors real. But they had won something unprecedented: absolute certainty of their right to exist. "The architects want to meet with you," Admiral Kethvar reported, approaching with the careful respect that had become universal when addressing Chun. "They say they've never seen anything like what just happened." Chun nodded but didn't turn away from the viewport. What they witnessed was the birth of something new. Not just a galactic civilization, but a galactic consciousness. We're not just separate species sharing space anymore. We're something more. The meeting with Synthesis took place in a neutral dimension, a space constructed specifically for the occasion. The architect appeared more solid than before, as if the galaxy's newfound existential weight was affecting even beings from higher dimensional frameworks. Sarah Chan of Earth, Synthesis said, you have accomplished something we believed impossible. You have made your galaxy immune to conceptual attack. No force in this universe can now convince existence that your people do not belong here. What happens now? Chen asked. Now you become what we once were. Gardeners, protectors. The galaxy you have saved will serve as a beacon for others facing similar threats. And eventually, when the time comes, you will teach them what you have learned. Chun considered this, watching the swirling energies that marked the boundary between dimensions. And what have we learned? That consciousness, when unified by purpose rather than conquered by force, becomes a weapon more powerful than any technology. That hope, when shared freely rather than hoarded jealously, becomes armor stronger than any shield. And that a species willing to sacrifice everything for others will find that everything includes the right to reshape reality itself. The war was over. The galaxy was safe. And in the quantum foam that underlies all existence, a new constant had been established. Wherever humans walked among the stars, hope would follow, and where hope existed, extinction was just another problem to be solved through applied stubbornness and the absolute refusal to quit. The galaxy would whisper humanity's name in awe for eons to come, but not because they were great warriors. They whispered it because humanity had taught the universe itself a new definition of what it meant to refuse defeat. In the end, that was the greatest victory of all.